not too hungover by now, I hope. My name's Ned, and I'm here to talk to you today about accelerating your IT career. This is my favorite session to do. They actually make me do this session. I don't submit for this one. They say, you're going to do this one. And I like it for that reason, too. It's a vote of confidence. But all week long, you've been coming to sessions of mine and colleagues, and we are all helping you pay us. And this is the session I get to do where I'm actually helping you, just you. And you get to help yourself. I have never had anybody come and say, this session was not helpful and it made my career worse. So if you get one or two good things out of this, you're better off, trust me. And I've had a lot of people come and say, like, I want to talk to you more about this, or I want to talk about this element, or I want to follow up with you. It's very successful. I've been talking about this for about 10 years. And I've basically sort of distilled some things we're going to talk about today. But after we're done with this, you're going to sort of, this session, we're going to make sure that you arrive in this career you're in right now, and sometimes survive this career you're in now, and then really thrive going forward. And we do that with 4 pretty easy to remember pillars. The first one is discipline. Does anybody know who this is? I heard it's over here. It's Benjamin Davis, Jr. He's a general. He was a general. In World War II, he was a colonel, and he commanded the Tuskegee Airmen. He fought in World War II, Korea, he got the Silver Star, Distinguished Flying Cross, he flew 60 missions over Germany, and he did all that while being an African-American colonel in charge of an all-African-American set of fighter squadrons in Alabama in 1941, which was a tough time to do that. He had immense personal and life discipline to do that. And I'm not asking you to have that level of discipline, but we're going to talk about having discipline and how that will help you in your career. Now, this next one, who's this? It's Grace Hopper, I heard that. Oftentimes, for a few years, people wouldn't know who this was, and I'd be like, Grace Hopper, like, invented UNIVAC and is the reason we're all sitting here right now. She created some of the first human language code. She basically inspired COBOL, which is still running to this day. Oh my God. She created one of the first ever compilers. She was just a crazy mathematician, and she was a technical powerhouse. And the next element of your career we're going to talk about after discipline is being a technical powerhouse. Everybody knows who this is. It's Winston Churchill. Does anybody remember anything that Winston Churchill ever did? He talked a lot. Correct. He's famous for saying stuff. You don't really remember, like, did he do anything? But no, he's like, we'll fight him on the beaches and we'll fight him in the streets. Like, he was tremendous at saying things that were inspirational and helpful and, you know, derived a message and led people to do things. That was his thing. And then we're going to talk about legacy. And everybody knows who this is. This is Gandhi. His legacy is freeing India from colonial rule and doing it with an amazing new invention of passive resistance. And his legacy is he's basically the godfather of freeing people in the modern times from being under control without violence. But his legacy is really like his legacy, right? I mean, you'll go to a period of time when people don't even really recognize what he did or who he was, but his face and his sort of, perception will be there forever and ever and ever, as all the specifics start to sort of vanish. He'll be that person. And these 4 elements are what we're going to go through over the next 40 minutes or so and cover in some detail how they can help you in your career and help you in your life so that you'll be happier, you'll be more successful, you'll really enjoy what you do, or figure out how to enjoy what you do somewhere else. So, let's talk about discipline. I want you to be a sponge. I want you to become multi-talented. I want you to have great personal integrity. I want you to be cool, not like cool, but like cool, like calm and collected. And I want you to be very determined. And let's talk about these now. Being a sponge, that means learning constantly, not just when your job or the situation is making you learn, which is the worst possible time to learn, right? The server's on fire, everybody's yelling, time to learn how DNS works. No. Learn constantly. There's a lot of really good content out there that we make, that other folks make, that a whole community of IT folks just like you make, and they go through their journey. The time to know all this is before you have problems with it, and the time before you want to deploy it, or redeploy it, or migrate it, or update it, or get rid of it. And we offer up things like Microsoft Docs, sure, that's all good stuff. But there's another world out there of really good stuff. There's a huge community of great bloggers for info, like this is Leslie Carhart, she does the tisphone.net blog, and she's an InfoSec researcher, and she's a forensics expert, and she writes these great posts about understanding things, and she sort of like goes through life having weird adventures, like learning that she suddenly was forced to have electronic locks on her apartment, and then she started taking those apart and finding out that she could open every lock in her apartment now with her phone. And then she ended up on TV about that, and then she ended up at Black Hat about that. And you can get all these sort of interesting stories and adventures out of these that aren't just our dry content. Then there is really, honestly, the only decent social network for IT, for us, is Twitter. That's really it. So if you follow people like Matt Graber, Matt might even, I don't know if he's here this week. I've seen Sean Metcalf, who's a friend of his, who's here. You find the right cohort of folks in your areas of interest or expertise, like information security, or this is an Active Directory security expert. You follow them, you learn a whole bunch of interesting technical information. You often make good colleagues and networking connections there that are more organic than like, here's my LinkedIn page. You know, I'm not gonna bag on LinkedIn because we own LinkedIn, but I don't have a LinkedIn page. This is not being recorded, is it? Oh, it is being recorded. Oh, well, I will get one tomorrow. Okay. Then we have a ton of documentation, and everybody does. All vendors do, but we have some new stuff that I don't think people are necessarily aware of. We have all these training modules. The whole Microsoft Learn framework and universe has been redone in the last few years, and it has tons of interesting stuff that you can use to learn and practice for free on your own time, at work, whenever you want to. And we have a whole network of people, some of whom are in here, MVPs, whose job is to be helpful to you, and becoming friends and helpful cohorts of theirs can help you and help them. They do talks, and you get to hear, and then you can do talks with them and learn. And you look like where's Karsten's down there in the corner peeking around a tree? That's why I use this slide, because he looks so weird down there. You know, we have an entire other Ignite that goes all around the world. So for all your colleagues who couldn't make it here and fly here, we will fly to you. Dozens and dozens of these going on this year where you can go and learn more stuff. But the whole point is learn all the time. And if you do go on Twitter, you should not follow me on Twitter, because you're going to get stuff like this. There's always a wave that goes across the audience as people process. That was in Atlantic magazine. That was my quote that they put in there. My father was super excited to hear that I was published in Atlantic Monthly, and then that was the quote. Wired too, but I don't think my dad reads Wired. Okay, so then be multi-talented. This is being multi-talented. Don't be good at one thing. Really be amazing at a few things. And just be good at the rest. You can be good at lots of stuff and okay at lots of stuff, and just be really, really good at a few things. And you know a few people in your life who are just good at one thing. And they're very good at the one thing, and they're sort of like guarding the one thing at work. And they don't want you to touch that thing, and they don't want anybody else to touch that thing. And they're actually usually kind of jerks. And they're always sort of like very protective, right? For them, their career is, I will be the one keeper of this thing, and if nobody knows how to do it, then I'll never get fired. But they'll also never really advance, and they'll get pretty jaded, and they will definitely get super bored, and they're just gonna take it out on people around them, and then their career's gonna suck. And you know that person. Everybody here knows that person, or has known that person. And you don't wanna be that person. So you can become expert in something, and get to the point where you're like, after a year or two, like, okay, I know this really well, and I've been making some money off this and doing some things, and I'm actually kind of bored of it, so I'm gonna go ahead and give this to a colleague, hopefully like a younger peer or somebody who needs help getting spun up, and I'm gonna learn an expert new thing. And just do that like once a year, until you have 3 or 4 or 5 things that you're incredibly good at, of which you have basically handed off each time, and you're still good at it. You're still an expert, and if some fire comes through, you can come in and swoop in and save the day, but you don't get bored and you don't get stuck. Integrity. Admit your mistakes. This is the famous horse crap story of George Washington cutting down the cherry tree that never happened. Admit your mistakes. It's a very simple message. The only thing worse than making a mistake is trying to cover up the mistake. You eventually get caught, and now everybody's like, oh, yeah, that's the guy who makes mistakes, and he tries to cover it up. That guy's freaking no good. Don't trust that guy. He sucks. Don't be the guy that sucks. Be cool. Now back to that one. Just be cool about what's going on. A lot of things we're working on seem in the moment to be incredibly bad, right? The file server won't boot, and people are yelling at me a lot, and that's really bad. And so I'm very stressed out. But you need to be able to get a grip on this stuff. Like this is a nuclear power plant in the Midwest that is underwater a few years ago, Fort Calhoun. That is something to be freaking out about. How about being in charge of this? I parked in the middle of the ocean. That you can be freaked out about. Oh, you want to take over for ending the Great Depression and then fighting World War II and all that good stuff? Yeah, you can freak out a little bit about that. But you're not having to deal with FDR level problems, so learn the perspective. And there's things you can do. I mean, some of them sound kind of like a little hippie-ish. I don't look very hippie-ish, but breathing exercises, therapy, having friends, finding some friends to have where you can just blow off steam, going to lunch with your friends, going out to dinner, decompressing, laughing, not working so hard. All of that stuff makes you way cooler. Way cooler. And then being determined, never surrendering. Does anybody know who this is? This one's a hard one. That's Mae Jemison. She was born in the 1950s in Alabama, and her father was a janitor, and her mother was a school teacher. And she was, pretty held back by her environment and sort of the lottery of her birth. And she was so smart, she got a scholarship to Stanford when she was 16, and she got her bachelor's in chemistry, and then she got her medical doctor at Cornell. And then she's like, wow, I'm a medical doctor having gotten out of the poverty of Alabama. Oh wait, I'm gonna go be a Peace Corps volunteer and help injured children in Liberia in Civil War. And then, after the Challenger disaster, she was one of the first of 2,000 people to volunteer to become the next astronauts on the next shuttle to fly. And out of those 2,000, she was picked, one of 15. So she flew on that and became the first African-American woman to ever go into outer space. And then she went back to Cornell and Dartmouth to become a professor and help lots of people. Like, her whole life is, it's incredible. That's somebody who's extremely determined. That's somebody who's not letting anything hold her back. This is Antonia Novello. She was from Puerto Rico. She grew up in extreme poverty. She grew up with like a horrible congenital disease that she needed surgery to be able to just sort of get around. She couldn't get till she was 18, and she was so upset at how crappy her surgery situation was that she decided to become a doctor, and she eventually became the first ever woman Surgeon General of the United States, just to show them. You should never surrender. If these two ladies could get through that stuff, you can get through your thing. Your career path, we often refer to as an arc, right? Your career arc. But arcs, have this shape and they come down. And I want your arc not to be an arc, but a 45-degree angle. That either you retire at the peak or you drop dead. This is how I get these good surveys. I talk about mortality. Okay, so we're a little bit through. Let's talk about being a technical powerhouse. You need to get really good memory. You need to have a lab. You need to understand dependencies. You need to understand networking. You need to understand automation. And you need to understand how to search. And if you can do all of these things, you will be a technical powerhouse, I promise you, no matter what your actual IQ might be. Memory. Figure out what makes you remember stuff. We often refer to this as memory, right? I mean, that's a stick of RAM. But that's not memory. That's, you turn it off and it's all gone, right? Like, we should call this memory. I don't know why we ever called hard drives instead of memory. They should be called memory because you turn them off and they remember stuff. Cool, right? How do you get to remember things? There's tons and tons of techniques out there. I am by no means, a psychiatrist or a cognitive, neurosurgeon, but mnemonic devices, just being organized, repetition like you were back in school, transcription is one that works for me, hands-on, making things, trying things, doing things helps you remember stuff, and then the good old-fashioned, like, sleep. So I really don't sleep well when I'm in the office, when I'm working hard, I'm thinking all the time, and I come to Ignite, and for some reason, I always sleep pretty well, and I just sort of feel like an amazing person when I get a full 8 hours of sleep when I'm at Ignite, where I just come to a hotel where there's no dogs barking and my wife doesn't need anything, and I'm just, wow, uninterrupted. And so I'm like powering through the days, feeling pretty good. Find those recall techniques and just really use them religiously. You can't always look everything up in the moment. Be able to do and run anything in a lab. Since virtualization came around years ago, this is a no-brainer. You can put things into Azure, you can put things into your Hyper-V server, you can put things into a free VMware workstation. I don't care where you run your VMs and where you run your stuff, but have it. I keep all of mine on a little drive that I walk around with all the time, and I can always have them no matter how bad things are going. And if some customer says, I have a problem migrating, and I'm like, cool, what you migrating? And he's like, boom, NT4, what do I do? Okay, I got you covered right there. Give me like 20 minutes, I can run an NT4 PDC. That's how far back I have to go sometimes. Keep that stuff around, keep it handy. Understand your dependencies. When I do Active Directory application, what do I use? DNS, LDAP, Kerberos, RPC. Okay. If I understand those dependencies, I understand how AD your application works. What if I use DFSR? DNS, LDAP, Kerberos, RPC. What about interactive login? DNS, LDAP, Kerberos, RPC. Like most of Windows, if you learn a handful of protocols, DNS, HTTPS, maybe these days OpenAuth or PAS or SAML, RPC, you will be able to troubleshoot almost any kind of networking problem, and most problems are networking problems. In our world of distributed systems, like the idea that you're going to be just messing around with a copy of Notepad is pretty thin. Once you know these dependencies, you can troubleshoot your way out of almost any problem with a bare understanding of the app. It's a really key piece. And we keep tons of documentation on our protocols carefully hidden from you in this article, the A to Z technologies list, which we bury in our previous versions area of docs, but it is there, all with loving detail. I wrote you a poem, a haiku. It's not DNS. There's no way it's DNS. It was DNS. I didn't write that haiku. It's a fantastic haiku. Okay, networking. Understand networking, network captures. If you can't read network captures in this world of distributed systems you live in, of Azure and hybrid and AWS and Active Directory and file replication and servers and SQL and web services, you are going to be in a world of hurt. Understand network captures is probably one of the most prime, main, core inline skills almost everybody here needs to have. If you can look at this and understand what's going on here with SMB, then you won't have to look at this diagram that I created to show you what was actually happening there in SMB. You don't want to be staring at this at 2 in the morning. You want to just be staring at this. Learn at least one scripting language, automation. This one is going to require more of that discipline on your part. And I don't care which one you learn. If it's PowerShell, great, that'll make Snover happy. But if it's CMD or Perl or Python or any one of those things, I really don't care. Just learn one. And if you don't know how to learn one, you can go to Wikiversity, Stack Overflow, the Scripting Guy, PowerShell Gallery, a bookstore, the library, community college. I don't care. You don't need to go get a computer science degree to learn scripting. It can be helpful to take a computer science introduction course, like a single community college type course, to learn like the good disciplines and sort of logic and insider rules of basic programming, because they apply to almost all languages. But you don't need to go and sit there and go get your bachelor's of science. But it will save your bacon. It will save your stuck in a room at 4 in the morning clicking through 1,000 users you just deleted if you learn at least one scripting language. Here, I'll show you one. This is PowerShell, and I have this little DevOps script. It's right here. Let's take a look at this thing real quick. So lots of interesting stuff. It's very complicated, PowerShell. This took me some time. Let's go ahead and fire this thing up and show you how good it is. There you go. All right, I always get, oh shit. Still, 30 years later, I still can't play Minesweeper. Finally, learn how to search. Learn how to search, and more importantly, learn how to search well and judge the results. There's a lot of bad stuff out there on the internet. Things that you can find from Microsoft or your vendor, those are good. Things that you can find from trustworthy sources that you build up, what we started with, trusted bloggers, trusted researchers, InfoSec people, consultants, MVPs, those are good. You start finding those I found it in a forum. You need to start learning what to trust and what not to trust. And I watch a lot of talented professional IT folks who are paid a lot of money to be professional IT folks sitting there believing shenanigans. It's just coming out of the belly of the internet sometimes. So learn how to peel back and find trustworthy sources and build yourself your library. Okay, communication. Conversation, teaching, presenting, positivity, control. Conversation is not just talking Like right now, I'm not having a conversation, really. I'm just like talking at you, right? I mean, that's not really a great conversation. This is a conversation. He doesn't speak English, right? But you know exactly what he wanted. He's very excited that I'm alive, and he's super happy that we're probably going to eat soon, and he would love to go out right now, and he's also super happy that I'm alive and he wants to see me again in 10 seconds. That's great conversation. Body language, being able to communicate, non-verbally, listening, not just having I wait for my turn to talk is part of conversation. A big part of conversation for our cohort, our tribe of folks is don't be yourself. Be somebody who actually wants to pay attention and listen and hear stuff and not just be the next one to talk and bring up your amazing idea. That's what conversation really can be. That first person we talked about who's down in the basement guarding their one idea, their one thing that they troubleshoot, they're not good at conversation, and they'll be in that boiler room 10 years from now. Teaching, be an educator, be somebody who can, not just converse, but also communicate and get people to learn, especially younger folks in your team, people who are just joining your team. You can really do like teaching techniques like you saw when you were in middle school and high school. I mean, when you're talking about having a plan or a new system you want to deploy, you can actually sort of hold class. You can have homework, it's okay. You can sort of help people along, you can use various techniques. IT is education. I mean, talking to your boss and explaining to them why you should do something, that is education. Talking to a small group of executives and teaching them why you're going to want to go spend a lot of their money, that is education. You've seen so far all these slides are like clearly from Creative Commons or pictures that I took and things like that. And then you'll start seeing some of these ones that are clearly from Microsoft that show, what it's like to be a teacher when you use the hub. And you're like, oh, this is exactly like I remember being in school. It's like, that thing's not even unlocked. Good marketing, dude. All right. So that takes me to this. Presenting, learning to like an audience. When I first started doing this, if I walked in here and saw all y'all in here, I'd be like, whoop, out of here. And you just get used to it. You got to build it up. You got to build it up. You got to prepare. You got to organize. You got to tell stories. You have to add humor. You have in the room hundreds or thousands of people with a pocket entertainment device who would rather do anything than listen to your bull crap when they could be playing, Bejeweled or something like that on their handheld amazing supercomputer. So you need to have attention grabbers. You need to have good PowerPoint technique. And you need to not be scared. Everybody know who this is. It's Adele, like one of the most famous singers in the universe. And she is terrified of being on stage in front of people. She has huge stage fright. And this is her, boop, at Wembley, like surrounded by 80 quadrillion people because she was able to get over that. And if she can get into that situation and get through it, so can you. Now, I don't usually do demos when I'm doing career slides, but I actually have a little bit of showing about PowerPoint because I see so much god-awful PowerPoint that I must impart some things. These are from my team, okay? So I'm not hurting anybody's feeling. These slides are from my team at Microsoft. The wall text. Let's see, what else we got? Oh, this is perfectly understandable. What about this one right here? Especially for the folks in the back. I bet you appreciate this one. Does everybody know what all of these acronyms mean? You get this much time to look at it before the next slide. And then my personal favorite, all of the above on one slide. Greg's gonna watch this on recording and be like, I'm gonna murder you, Ned. Okay, slides are actually really, really hard. You need to understand like what makes good slides. Animations do make good slides. They draw attention with high contrast in the slides, not light blue on dark blue, not yellow on orange, not gray on white, which is like one of the Ignite templates. And notice how as I do things, like the eye is drawn because I'm using PowerPoint's awesome dim function to say, I'm talking about attention, now I'm talking about contrast, now I'm talking about attention. And for people in the audience who like need that extra nudge to focus, you'll know what I'm talking about right now, but if you wanted to note something down, it's still there. I never have more than 6 things on the screen, if you noticed that yet. That's a thing, it's a science thing called Miller's Law, the magical number 7, which I subtract 1 just to be even more dirty about it, is if you have 6 things, people will remember it. And you can do plus or minus on that. 7 is the most, and if you do more than that, generally speaking in cognition studies, they will remember nothing. If you do 6, they will probably remember 80 to 90% of it. So when you see those walls of text, I'm just like, go put that in a Word document where it belongs and learn how to write slides. You notice that I never really use sentences. I just use word talk in slide because I'm talking and you're hearing me and your brain must listen. It can't help it. But if it sees sentences, it must read them. And then it can't do both those things at the same time. It's not how human brains work. So I put ideas on the screen and I talk about them at length and then we record it and you go back and listen to it later to get the whole story. And then you just sort of break it all up with dog flying rainbow pictures and all that kind of shenanigans. So every once in a while you sort of snap people back to your attention. Okay? Then there's positivity. Confidence is highly contagious. You see this fella, you're like, I just want to do whatever he says. He seems so confident. You see this guy, and you're like, oh, Teddy Roosevelt says go jump out of a plane. I'm jumping out of a plane. Let's do this. You see Frederick Douglass, you're like, oh, so you like stood up to the Confederacy? Yeah, that's fairly confidence-inspiring. You see this person, anybody know who this is? You'd probably have to be from Illinois to know who this is. Tammy Duckworth, she's a senator. This is Tammy Duckworth before she became a senator. Lost both her legs being a Black Hawk pilot in Iraq. That's somebody who is like living the confidence dream there because out of frame, she has no legs. If you project that kind of positivity, people will do anything. It's contagious. If things are going bad and that stupid server won't boot and people are freaking out and you're freaking out, then we're all just freaking out. And if you're confident and chill and like, even though you are super freaking out on the inside, then everybody's gonna be like, why is she so super calm about this? I'm not gonna be the one looking like a spaz right now. Let's do what she's doing. That leads to control. When you're confident, you can become dominant without being domineering. Now, everybody knows who this is. Yeah. Right? Caesar Milan, the dog whisperer. He doesn't like beat his dogs or chain them or whip them or yell at them or shove their face in their accidents. He's like the calmest, nicest, most chill person ever, but he is in control of the dogs. And all those people you work with are the dogs. Part of that is just like being able to like be calm again. Part of it's being able to just decide like, you know, we're having 15 people on this conference call and about 10 of them are managers who need to go somewhere else and do something else. So we'll give them some tasks with some status updates. They can come back later and sort of get out of your hair and you haven't hurt anybody's feelings. Everybody's feeling very important, but there's no more managers on the phone now. That's great, and now you can focus. Concentration, you're really just, it's herding cats, right? That's the whole nature of being dominant without dominating. You're just trying to, without yelling or demanding, be decisive, sound like you have a plan if you don't have a plan, And people will mostly get out of the way. Most people don't want to be in charge of the situation. So let them not be in charge. They crave your leadership, trust me. Okay, so that was the first three, and we're down to the last one. And it's the most important one. It's your legacy. I want you to share, and I want you to have some remains. Share everything. Everything you keep to yourself is useless. Everything that you don't write down, don't put into a document, don't put into a knowledge base, don't blog about, don't tweet about, aren't helpful with, you might as well have not bothered to ever do. It is gone. You and I and everybody here, if we're like amazingly beating the odds, will be on the earth for like 100 years. And like those last 10, you probably aren't going to be all that like communicative. Your sharing of what you have learned and what you have done is honestly the only proof that you ever existed. And it's incredibly helpful, not just to everybody around you, not to your business, your organization, or your manager, but to you as well. If you have a knowledge base that you fill in, or a blog post that you write, or something like that, you will find your way back to those things. And everybody can use them, and everybody gets help. You become that sort of thought leader, helpful person that we started off talking about. You become that elevated person that people want to work with and get help from and partner on and deploy things with and go on projects with. And it also is like it makes you feel better. Like being alone sucks. And sharing is like, oh, other people out there are having the same stupid problems with these stupid computers that I've been having too for my whole life. And so if you sit there, I mean, everybody knows Mr. Rogers and Officer Lemson, right? The ultimate embodiment of sharing was that man and that show and the folks on that show. But honestly, if you want to learn how to be good at IT, you should just watch some Mr. Rogers episodes. Really. And you will learn how you grow relationships, you'll become a better leader, your team will get stronger, and you will be further and further away from being that guy who has that one thing that he guards, who is increasingly becoming miserable and isolated until they effectively just die unhappy. And that leads me to my last little point, which is the remains. Did you ever exist? If you were to look back now and understand if there's some proof that I was ever here. So this is a very famous photograph. It's from Buzz Aldrin. It's his own footprint on the moon. And you know, obviously there's no atmosphere on the moon and there's not much to solar wind. So when he took those prints and walked around, that footprint's gonna be there probably till the sun explodes. That is quite a legacy. And I'm not asking you to build a legacy like that. I'm saying that if you invent something, create some documentation, write some training and give it, write scripts, design some kind of big distributed system for a customer. When you build things and they're left there behind you, that is a legacy. That is part of your remains. When you write lots of things that is helpful, that is part of your legacy. So when that 50 years is gone, people will still be looking at your information and being helped. I did a session on Tuesday about Active Directory migration, which I haven't done in a long time. And I ended up just going back and looking at my own blog posts from 10 years ago thinking, wow, I used to know this stuff really well. I sure am glad I wrote it down and shared it with everybody. And all week long at the booth, people kept coming around saying, I've been reading AskDS for years and it's very helpful. And I'm like, oh good, I stopped writing on it 10 years ago. I'm glad to hear that it still helped you. That's a great legacy, right? I'm pretty pleased right now that if I dropped dead on this stage, that I would still be able to help some people from the grave. And you're kind of aiming for that, right? So if nothing's coming, start pushing and making things come your way. If there's no projects, conceive some things. If you feel yourself stuck working on the same stuff, it's time to make a change. If you wait for the world to do that for you, it just won't ever come. You absolutely have to make those decisions yourself and make these kinds of marks yourself so that there'll be some proof that you ever lived. Discipline, technical powerhouse, communication, legacy. Thanks very much.